here to teach you all a lesson. Sometimes in life, horrible and unexplainable things happen. These things are a test of character. And I have character.
This is Next Door Villain.
I'm Tiana.
I'm Joe.
In this podcast, we practice empathy by discussing fictional villains.
Because if we can learn to understand characters that were designed to be hated, then we might just have a chance of understanding the real-life villains we encounter every day.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Next Door Villain. We are talking about Agatha Trunchbull from Roald Dahl's Matilda, also a great children's movie from the 90s.
Yeah, that's got to be a 90s movie. I'm super I'm super excited about this one because I loved this movie when I was growing up, and I was incredibly scared of Miss Trunchbull. I actually would have to hide behind the couch when I watched this film. That's how scary it was for me.
Yeah, and I, on the other hand, did not watch Matilda when I was young. I instead watched Matilda a few weeks ago for the first time, and I was scared as a 24-year-old. So
yeah,
we were both scared.
Very scary villain this week. This week we're going to try something new, and we're going to have a little competition. And if it goes well, we're going to do this in future episodes too, to see who can give a better summary of the villain. And we're each going to have 30 seconds to give our best summary, and then you can go on our website and vote to see who did a better job. And we're going to figure out some kind of prize or punishment for the loser at the end of the season.
A punishment? I think we are truly talking about Miss Trunchbull today because you're definitely in the mood for punishment.
Okay, maybe not a punishment, but, something fun. If you have any ideas for what we can do to the loser or what the winner will have to...
Sorry, I just made a sad face. Gosh. If you have any ideas, like maybe if Joe loses this week, because he probably will, he can eat a massive cake that will make him sick. You know what?
Maybe I'll lose on
Miss
purpose.
Trunchbull does. No, because the cake will be so big. Well, yeah, you'll understand when you hear our synopsis.
Hopefully. Okay. Do you want to go first?
Okay, here we go. Okay, I'm gonna push the start.
Wait, I'll count you down.
Oh, wait. Okay, I need.
All right.
Okay.
3, 2, 1. Go. Okay,
so Miss Trunchbull is the principal of a school called Trunchbull Elementary School, a pretty intense elementary school, and Matilda is a bright but young girl who, for some reason, has the gift of telepathy. No one knows why, and she attends Miss Trunchbull's elementary school. And she's very afraid of Miss Trunchbull because Miss Trunchbull does a series of punishments to kids. Like if they steal her cake, she makes them eat a bunch of cake until they're sick, and she also locks them in a pointy closet. I'm like, wow, that was hard.
Yeah, so I think you definitely were able to explain that she works at a school.
Well, I needed to give like a background.
Right, I think you've really set me up for success this week.
Oh no. Okay, wait, I'm going to count you down. 3, 2, 1.
Okay, Agatha Trunchbull is the headmistress of this elementary school, and she's this great big burly woman, and she's really scary and angry, and she's really mean to the kids, and the kids are all really scared of her because they do bad things. She throws them in the chokey, which is this room with like really sharp nails and stuff around the edges. It's really scary. One of the teachers at the school is Miss Honey, who is Miss Trunchbull's niece, and also Miss Trunchbull raised Miss Honey when she was growing up because Miss Honey's parents died when they were younger, and people think that Miss Trunchbull might have killed Agnes Honey, which is Miss...
Okay, so you got a little farther.
Okay.
I can give you that.
Well, people can go on to our website and they can vote on who did a better job. So they can vote for me.
I at least said the name of the elementary school, which is a very interesting tidbit.
Yeah, I suppose. Crunchum.
Crunchum.
Okay, well, I really do think that we need to talk a little bit more about Miss Trunchbull's background story, since neither of us got too deep into that. So she's the headmistress of the elementary school, and Miss Honey, who is one of the teachers, Miss Trunchbull raised Miss Honey growing up because Miss Honey's parents both died when she was very young. Her mom died, I think, giving birth. Is that right? Or shortly after giving birth to Miss Honey?
I can't remember. I just know that she died.
Well, she died, and Miss Honey's father, Agnes, invited Miss Trunchbull to move in with him to help him raise Miss Honey. And shortly thereafter, Agnes died. And the official record says suicide, but a lot of people think that Miss Trunchbull might have killed him in order to take over his wealth and his mansion. And then she was left to raise Miss Honey.
Yep, and then Miss Trunchbull kept the house after Miss Honey grew up and Miss Honey moved out, but she still really wanted her items back and her house back. And so Matilda helps her do that by using her telepathy skills to kind of scare Miss Trunchbull, thinking that, the ghost of Magnus is there trying to drive her out of the mansion that she took from him and his family. There's that scene where his picture is like flying around and she's like really scared about it. Then she also scares Miss Trunchbull again at the school by using her telepathy to write on the chalkboard that Magnus is coming for her, or Magnus knows what she did, and this scares her, and then Miss Trunchbull leaves and no one knows where she went after that.
And Miss Trunchbull is a really strong, aggressive, powerful woman. Part of her backstory is that when she was younger, she was actually an Olympic athlete, which is super cool. I mean, not everyone gets to be an Olympic athlete.
Right. And she still practices. So she throws a javelin, and then the kids are all scared of her because she really knows how to throw.
Yeah, she really seems to be passionate about her athletic abilities. And I kind of wonder if she's sad that part of her life is over, that she's not able to be in the Olympics anymore or to be this amazing athlete.
Right. It might be hard to transition into being a regular civilian with a quote unquote regular job. So much a part of your identity is competing and being the best that you can be.
She's also not your stereotypical ideal woman. So I wonder if her strength and her athletic ability is something that she really leaned on as a child in order to get other people to admire her and to make her feel like she fit in. Because, maybe there were other children who were making fun of her, and being a strong, amazing athlete was a way that she was able to rise above all that and to be successful and happy with herself, despite the fact that she didn't quite fit in with other people or other girls her age.
Right. And performing very masculine has gone with her to adulthood. Now in Matilda, in the movie, she's not seen as very nice because she has this very aggressive front. I can tell that she challenges what a stereotypical woman would look like. And in one way that she does this in the movie is she goes to Miss Honey's class and all the children are really scared of her. And she asks them how they spell a word. I think the word is beautiful. And then they spell it as saying Mrs. in front of each word. So Mrs. instead of Miss. So they're saying Mrs. B, Mrs. E, Mrs. A, right? And then she gets really mad and asks why are they all married? And I think it really shows her frustration with just society's expectation that if you're a woman and you're an adult, then you should be married. It doesn't really seem like she wants to follow that. And I think she's also upset that society will try and teach children at a young age that women need to be a certain way, or that they need to be Mrs. if they're an adult woman, which is not always the case.
And because she's the villain in this story, I think it's really easy for us to assume that maybe she doesn't have perhaps a husband of her own because she was this angry, aggressive person and no one liked her. But, it's also very possible that that's just not what she wanted from her life. Not getting married can definitely also be a choice as well. And just because someone isn't what we would think of as
the marriage type. Yeah. I think, we've been conditioned. When I was younger, I would think, if I had a teacher that wasn't Mrs., I used to think it was weird because at a young age, I was really conditioned to think that if you were an adult woman, that you should be Mrs. But I think Miss Trunchbull really challenges that notion that you have to be a Mrs. if you are an adult woman.
And she really proves, I mean, she was an Olympic athlete. You know, she really proves that you don't have to be what society says you should be in order to be successful. She went to the Olympics. I don't know how well she did, but that's an accomplishment in itself. And now she's the headmistress of an elementary school. That's certainly a lot more than a lot of us achieve in our lives. And she did that by being herself and not conforming and not letting the world bring her down. There are a lot of assumptions in this story about how terrible of a person Miss Trunchbull is, and she certainly does a lot of bad things. But one thing I was really kind of interested in was this idea that she might have killed Agnes Honey, because in both the movie and the book, it's kind of suggested that she killed him, but it's mostly suggested by other characters who are scared of her. But in reality, his death was ruled a suicide. So I'm wondering how it affects the way that we view Miss Trunchbull if, instead of assuming that she killed Agnes, assume that he died of his own accord.
You know, if he died by suicide, there could have been other reasons that Miss Trunchbull may not have had any influence in, per se. Like, for example, he could have died by suicide because of the death of his wife or other personal things happening in his life. Magnus and Miss Trunchbull may have actually had a good relationship with each other. I mean, he trusted her enough to help take care of Miss Honey when she was little. Maybe Miss Trunchbull and her sister, who was married to Magnus, may not have had as good of a relationship. For example, you know, Miss Honey's mother, you know, had a big mansion with a great husband and a beautiful daughter. Miss Trunchbull is kind of looked at as society as kind of weird and aggressive because she's so aggressive. I know that Miss Trunchbull, she does a lot of humiliating of other people, like children, as a form of punishment. And I just know that people, I think all like guidance counselors in high schools know this, or at least I assume that they know this, that if someone humiliates or bullies someone else, that usually means that the bully was humiliated and bullied themselves. So maybe Miss Trunchbull had a past, maybe with her sister or maybe with other people in her life, but I don't know if it was so bad to the point where she would plot to kill Magnus for his house.
Yeah, and like you said, she may have had a very good relationship with Magnus because he did invite her to live with him and help raise Miss Honey. And if they had a good relationship and then he committed suicide, that must have been really, really hard on her. She had just lost her sister. Now she lost this friend that she was living with. Now she has to raise this child that's a constant reminder of these two terrible things that just happened in her life. And I'm not excusing the fact that she's terribly mean to kids nowadays, but you can really see how these terrible incidences could really affect the way that she thinks and feels and views the world, and might have had an effect on how she acts today.
Miss Honey and Matilda are really mean about the fact that Miss Trunchbull took Miss Honey's house. But Miss Trunchbull is still family. There's still a chance that she actually had the rights to that house, right? Like, no one really thought of that. And, like, did she kick out Miss Honey when Miss Honey was old enough? Did they say that in the movie?
You know, I don't remember, but it's also very possible that Miss Honey just left. That's a normal thing that kids do when they grow up, is they leave their homes and go find new homes.
Right. And she made it sound like, oh, Miss Trunchbull stole my house, which I guess might be the case, but also Miss Trunchbull is blood. Her name could have been written in the will, and then Miss Honey could have just left, like, oh, she took my house. But we really don't know that for sure. What if you just left and Miss Trunchbull just kept it?
Yeah, one of the problems, I think, with the Matilda story is that we view Miss Trunchbull from the perspective of Matilda and Miss Honey, who don't think very highly of her, but neither of them probably have complete opinions of her. I mean, all the things that happened with Miss Honey's parents happened when she was very, very young, and she may be operating on assumptions of what happened, and Matilda's opinion of her is viewed only on what she hears from Miss Honey and the way that she sees Miss Trunchbull acting. And yes, Miss Trunchbull acts really terribly, but it's also very possible that she went through some really terrible trauma throughout her entire lifetime. And I think it's important to remember that when thinking about who she is today.
And even like going on about who she is today, I find Miss Trunchbull really interesting because she seems to have a different philosophy on teaching and discipline. And I really like thinking about that because now I'm also working in education. When working in education, you really want to try and cultivate students to be successful and hardworking individuals. And I think Miss Trunchbull knows that, but the way she tries and teach students and the ways she disciplines them is much different than how other people might think she should do that. She is very aggressive, right? Like she wants to teach children a lesson. Like there are bad things that happen in life and you need to be the one to take responsibility and make things better for your life. And the way to do that is to be disciplined and hardworking. And I think the way that she punishes children seems very harsh, but it just takes on a different type of philosophy. And sometimes you do have to be harsh and aggressive with students. Okay, not abusive, right? Like there's a line here. I think I can take a little bit of Miss Trunchbull's philosophy into my own job because sometimes I feel like I'm too soft on students because I work with college students more on the advising side. And maybe I'll just very nicely say, oh, it looks like you're on academic probation. Here are the things that you need to do in order to improve your academics. And I kind of say it like, yeah, you can totally do that. And I say it really nicely because I want them to know that it's a kind environment here. But then they kind of brush it off, maybe because I say it too nicely. Maybe they don't understand the seriousness of what they need to do in order to succeed and not drop out of school. So I think if I were also a little bit more aggressive or a little bit more firm, I could actually teach students more effectively. Just saying like, look, these are the things that you have to do. You need to do it. You need to take responsibility on this. If you don't do it, bad things are going to happen, right? Like if you're a little bit more aggressive and more firm, it might work with some students where they'll finally get the picture of what they need to do. And I think Miss Trunchbull has a lot of that where she's like, sometimes bad things happen in life and I'm going to make sure that you're disciplined in order to deal with it because I'm a strong person and I think you can be a strong person, but first I got to make you into one. And it's not going to be pretty, but sure as hell you're going to thank me in the end.
Yeah. Well, we give a lot of leeway to people who are far, far too nice. We have a lot of sympathy for really, really nice people. And that's one end of the extreme. Miss Trunchbull is way, way too mean. And because of that, we give her very, very little sympathy. And to some extent, that is fair because in a lot of ways, she's really abusing children. But we also can't forget, like you said, that sometimes aggressiveness and strictness can be a real asset. And you need to have a balance. She's definitely on the extreme end of being too mean, but there are good things about being aggressive and mean at times.
Yeah, and it reminds me of a book that I read in high school. It's actually a memoir. It's a true story. It's called Battle Hymn of the Tiger Mother. So the author of the book, who's also the mother, she raised 2 daughters and she was really, really strict with them. Like they had to play piano for hours. They couldn't have any sleepovers when they were young. She called them lazy and pathetic if they didn't work hard enough. She was really strict, and this memoir that I read was really shocking and it was controversial when it came out. I think it came out in like 2011. And of course, there's also a cultural piece that doesn't really have anything to do with Miss Trunchbull, but the author went on a lot of interviews and the interviewers were asking the author/mother, like, why did you do this to your daughters? And she said, I did it because I love them, because I want them to succeed. And in a way, these daughters did really succeed. Like one of the daughters auditioned at Juilliard at age 11. Both of the daughters went to Harvard. They were both very successful people. When I watched Matilda, I thought about this book and how just the different philosophy can help people eventually become successful, or at least become their own idea of successful.
Yeah, let's not forget that Ms. Honey turned out to be a great teacher.
That's true. She did. A very nice teacher.
Yeah, I don't know the specifics of her upbringing, but something went okay, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah, so in summary, I think we do not support the methods that Ms. Trunchbull uses to torture her students, but we have some sympathy for what she might have gone through in her life to lead to where she is today, and maybe some respect as well for some of the ways that she's able to be aggressive and strict that may be difficult for us.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know it seems... Yeah, I guess I should clarify. It kind of sounds like I support Miss Trunchbull's way of harming children, and I don't. But Joe said that much more eloquently than I did.
Yes, thank you. This seems like a great time to end our conversation and move on to the next part of the podcast. For the second part of each episode, we share a literary piece written about that villain. We believe that these literary pieces, like poems and short stories, can add a level of emotional insight to the characters that our conversation may not be able to. Today we have a short story written by Jessie Hunt. She's a writer who writes anything and everything, and she hopes to write and publish a novel within the next few years. And I'll be reading Jessie's story today, so hopefully I can do it some justice. And just one caveat, the piece was written with some accents, so I apologize in advance for totally butchering them. Anyways, here's the story. It's called Aggie Trunchbull, and it's by Jessie Hunt. 13-year-old Aggie Trunchbull stood in a concrete circle. Her hands and neck, where she had cradled the 12-pound shot-put ball, were covered in ghost white chalk dust. She had just thrown the shot put, her technique perfected by early morning practices each day with her father. Archibald Trunchbull bent down on the grass and marked the spot where the ball had landed with a great thud to the ground. The force with which she launched the ball would have been an impressive display for a young man in his 20s. The fact that the feat was done by his young teen daughter made the display extraordinary. He stood up and walked towards Aggie and pulled a measuring tape from his breast pocket. He handed her an end of the measuring tape. "Hold this and let's see what we've got." Archibald bent down and held the measuring tape tight across the grass like a long yellow snake between his palms. He looked at the number and did a double take. He jumped up and ran to Aggie, wrapping his arms around his daughter in a big bear hug. "Aye, good girl, Aggie, a new personal best for you. You make your old man proud. Someday you will be an Olympian. You'll place better than your old dad ever did," he said. Archibald smiled and put an arm around Aggie, and the pair walked across the expansive lawn that was a makeshift shot-put, javelin, and hammer-throw training grounds. They walked towards the well-kept home, the nicest home on Giant's Drive in Kidderminster, England. They entered the house and turned to the parlor room with large cathedral ceilings. In grand style, above the fireplace, hung a larger-than-life-size portrait of her father. And with how tall her father is in real life, the portrait was humongous. The picture portrayed a much younger Archibald on the day he received the bronze medal for England in the Olympics. He had a full head of thick brown hair, had a bronze medal around his neck, and a serious look which would have made him look severe. However, the artist added the smile lines around Archibald's eyes, betraying the jolly good humor he always felt, even when he was trying to look serious. Emily Trunchbull sat on a chair in front of the fireplace, the morning paper in her lap. She daintily sipped tea from a flowery teacup. She woke earlier than both her husband and daughter. In 15 years of marriage, Archibald had never seen her without her hair perfectly set and her makeup exactly perfect. She simply would not allow it. She readied the breakfast, one for Archibald, one for Aggie. No greasy meats for Aggie, only grapefruit and light yogurt for her daughter. Emily's feeble attempt to fight her daughter's thick features. Aggie saw her mother seated there and couldn't help thinking about an afternoon a few weeks prior. Her mother was seated in the high-back salmon velvet chair, and her father was still at work, and her mother hadn't known Aggie had arrived home early from school. "She has the unfortunate build of a man. When she was born a girl with the face of her father, I was so disappointed. I didn't even want to hold her," she heard her mother say in a whining voice on the phone. Her father's booming voice broke her free from this memory. "Here comes our future Olympian. She'll be the toast of England," Archibald's voice echoed through the house. Her mother didn't seem to notice, her head bent, skimming the morning news. Aggie smiled. She loved how happy these practices made her father, but Aggie had a secret. She didn't really want to continue with shot putting. She had something else in mind. She ate breakfast in the dining room with her father. When she was finished, she hugged him goodbye as he left for work. Aggie gathered her school uniform and walked towards the bathroom door. Her mother stood in front of the bathroom, blocking her path. Her arms were crossed over her chest, her lips pursed.
"Agatha, what do you think you're doing? You need to tidy your room and be off to school," her mother said. "But Mom, I need to shower. I don't want to be the smelly kid at school," Aggie said. "You should have thought of that before making such a mess of your things," her mother said. Emily then turned and locked the bathroom door and returned the key to her pants pocket. Aggie wanted to protest, but knew it was no use. She rushed quickly about her room, tidying up. She made her bed, stacked her books on her bookshelves. Frantically, she kicked the dirty clothes scattered on the floor underneath her bed. She knew her mother would check there and scold her thoroughly when she got home. Once her mother was satisfied with the state of her room, she unlocked the door. Aggie had only just enough time to change out of her sweaty track clothes into her school uniform. She wore a dark green plaid skirt and matching vest and long navy socks that reached to her knees. She grabbed her toothbrush and toothpaste and put it in her messenger bag and ran out the door towards her school, Crunchum Hall. When Aggie entered the school, she walked quickly to the loo on the second floor, relieved to find it empty. She went to the supply closet, hoping there would be some fresh towels. Behind large jugs of industrial soap and bleach, she found a stack of gray and worn, although clean, towels. At the basin, she began to wet the towels in warm water, wringing them so they were only damp. Carefully, she washed the sweat and chalk from her face and neck, and then, checking to make sure she was alone, washed under her arms and legs. Then Aggie grabbed her toothbrush and toothpaste. As Aggie brushed her teeth, she looked at herself in the mirror. She had a high, large forehead with deep horizontal creases. She had a very strong, square chin, and her skin was pink from sun exposure. She wore her dishwater brown hair every day in a tight ponytail. Aggie didn't love the way she looked, but she didn't hate herself either. She was stronger than all of her classmates, even the boys. However, sometimes she wondered what it would be like to have a slim ballerina figure to match how gracefully she could turn while throwing a shot put. A face her mother would be proud of. Just then, one of the prettiest girls in school, Melinda Carlisle, walked into the bathroom accompanied by her two best friends. Melinda was tall and pretty. Her long blonde hair was perfectly curled like the models in magazines. Her big, honey-colored eyes and long lashes were accented by dark purple liner. As soon as they saw Aggie, Melinda clutched her hand in a large, dramatic motion to her chest. She made a loud, fake shrieking sound and ran in mock terror down the hall. Her friends followed her, giggling. An advantage to Aggie's size and family name was that no one would dare bother her to her face, for fear she would pummel them. However, in the past year, some of her classmates became brave, learning that being beautiful gave them a power in many ways better than being physically strong. They had perfected a passive stream of cruelties. One day, she had found a crude drawing on her maths chair of a nasty troll with a ponytail holding a javelin. Beneath, in large letters, read, "I'm ugly Aggie." Aggie would deal with Melinda. In music class, Aggie walked up to where Melinda was seated. Aggie was much too quick for Melinda and grabbed her bag and turned it upside down on top of Melinda's head. Papers, folders, and books spilled out onto the floor. Melinda stood to grab her things, but each book and pen and paper Melinda reached for, Aggie kicked out of her reach. Aggie stood there, towering over Melinda, and waited for her to say something, when they were interrupted by Marcus Bogtrotter, Vincent Terry, and Travis Walsh. Marcus had stolen one of the senior students' purple choir robes. The robe was much too big for him, and draped his body more like a tent than a garment. Marcus stood on top of Mr. Davies' desk, the robe falling nearly to the floor like an elegant cape. Crudely drawn on Marcus's face in black ink was a mustache and beard, and on his head he wore a paper crown. On his middle finger he wore a ring with a large purple stone. Marcus held his hand out and said, "I am King Marcus. Peasants, show your fealty for your king. Kiss my ring." Vincent and Travis were laughing and knelt in front of the table. Some of the other boys jokingly kissed the ring. Aggie laughed and threw Melinda's bag on the ground. She turned towards Marcus and bent her head in a delicate curtsy. "Your Highness," Aggie said, and took her seat in the back of the music room. She pulled out her music to sight read. She didn't need to practice. She knew the words by heart. Tucked in her music folder was a special piece of music and a worn brochure Mr. Davies had given her. He had written, "Auditions, April 15th," and circled it in black ink. There was a picture of young men and women in choir robes singing on a large stage. Her Royal Majesty's Chamber Singers. "You have a strong, beautiful voice. You sound just like Judy Garland. This is the audition, and I know you can do it, and once you're accepted, every door to professional career will be open for you," Mr. Davies had said a month ago. Aggie knew her parents wouldn't support her dreams of singing professionally at the expense of her sporting. But she knew that if she earned her spot, her travel and expenses would be paid in full, and her parents couldn't argue with that. Mr. Davies entered. "Good morning, musicians." He was a tall, skinny man who was sharply dressed in a navy wool suit with a matching navy polka dot bow tie. He had black, square-rimmed glasses and short red hair. Mr. Davies smiled, unfazed by King Marcus's display on top of his desk. "Marcus, get down, and after class today you can clean your footprints off my desk. You can use Mr. Johansson's cleaning clies at the corner of the music room." The cart was filled with large canisters of industrial bleach, cleaners, paper towels, waste bin liners, and other supplies the janitor had. After Mr. Davies led the class in a warm-up of vocal scales, he had an announcement. "Thank you to everyone who auditioned for the solo. Aggie will be taking the solo in Loch Lomond. Congratulations, Aggie. Now please stand, everyone," he said. Melinda muttered something Aggie could not hear and rolled her eyes. The class stood, holding their music in front of them. Mr. Davies faced the bass section, although many of the boys, being 13, did not quite have the vocal range to be considered basses. Then the tenors joined in. The next two measures the altos joined, followed finally by the sopranos. Near the end of the song, everyone was silent, and Mr. Davies and the class turned to watch Aggie. And Aggie sang. Aggie's strong contralto voice filled the chorus room with warmth. "Righto, nice job, everyone. Remember to take advantage of the rests. Use them to breathe so you have enough air to comfortably hold each note." And Aggie, "Bravo," Mr. Davies beamed. "Your voice has a beautiful intensity well beyond your years. Superb." "Let's take a 5-minute break. Aggie, can I have a word with you?" Aggie set her water bottle on her seat and walked to the piano. "Are you practicing every day for your audition?" Mr. Davies asked. "Yes, sir, every day," she said. "I have all the faith in you in the world. After school for the rest of the week, you can practice with me for a half an hour to prepare," Mr. Davies said. Aggie smiled. That would be wonderful. Mr. Davies was her favorite teacher. Really, the only teacher she liked. The practice time would also keep her out of the house, away from her mother. Everyone returned to their seats. Aggie took a gulp from her water bottle. But something wasn't right. She dropped the water bottle. The water spilled to the floor and she could smell a strong chemical from the puddle. Her mouth felt like it was burning away like a piece of paper to a flame. Her eyes watered and she bent over and gagged. Mr. Davies ran from the piano to where she was now crouched on the floor convulsing. "Vincent, run and tell the headmaster to call an ambulance," Mr. Davies yelled. Aggie, bent over on the floor, briefly looked up and saw a large Cheshire grin on Melinda's face. "Listen to her choking," Melinda whispered to her friends. Aggie looked to Mr. Davies, who handed her a glass of water, but she couldn't swallow. "I can't drink. It hurts," she tried to say, but her voice sounded gravelly, and the words she tried to speak came out of her mouth like the croak of a toad. "Now her voice is as ugly as her face," Melinda said. Several of the boys and girls laughed. Aggie knew her voice. and her dreams would never be the same.
Thank you, Jesse, for that great piece, and that's a wrap for our episode on Miss Trunchbull. If you have more thoughts on Miss Trunchbull, then feel free to send us an email at nextdoorvillain@gmail.com, and we might even discuss it on a future episode. If you'd like to share your thoughts using your voice, then feel free to leave a voicemail at 567-343-3359, and we may even play that too on a future episode. Again, the number is 567-343-3359. Our show today was produced by us, Joe Anderson and Christiana Hennings. All the artwork for the podcast and design on our website, nextdoorvillain.com, was created by Erica Nitschke. Special thanks to Jessie Hunt for her literary piece today. If you'd like to have your own home-written literature featured, then please go to nextdoorvillain.com to submit and to look for details. Please subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts or Google Play, and please leave us a review. Thank you so much for listening, and be sure to tune in next week.